Good evening and welcome to the third session of our discussion under Module 1. We are discussing on the special senses. By name, I'm Bala Osman. I'll be with you for this period of discussion. And we'll be mainly discussing about the anatomy of ear and the sense of hearing and balance. The ear houses two senses. We have the sense of hearing and the sense of equilibrium or balanced. The sense of hearing is being interpreted in the temporal part of the brain, precisely in the auditory cortex of the brain, while the sense of equilibrium or balance is being interpreted in the cerebellum. Basically, for the purpose of descriptions, the ear is divided into three parts. We have the outer or the external ear, we have the middle ear, and we have the internal ear. The external ear extends from the outside, that is from the pinna or the auricle, off to the area of the tympanic membrane, or also called as eardrum, while the middle ear is an air-filled chamber medial to the tympanic membrane, and the inner ear is a set of a fluid-filled chamber medial to the middle ear. Functionally, the external and middle ears are involved in hearing only, whereas the inner ear functions in both hearing and balance. Technically, it's saying that the external and middle ear have no any issue or no any functional relation with the balance. Now let's see the anatomy of each different part of the ear. Let's quickly start from the external ear. The external ear, as earlier mentioned, extends from the auricle, also called as the pinna, and to the area of the tympanic membrane or the eardrum. Now, looking externally here, we have the auricle. The auricle is cartilaginous in nature, actually, made up of the elastic cartilage. So it is found outside the body, and this auricle now opens into the external acortic meatus. The external acortic meatus just serves as a passageway that leads to the tympanic membrane. So it just spaced from the outside off to the area of the tympanic membrane. Functionally, the auricle collects sound waves and directs them toward the external acortic meatus. And these sound waves are now being transmitted to the tympanic membrane. If we look at the external acoustic meatus, which is the second part of the external ear, it's a bit made up of cartilage and bony. So the lateral half of it is cartilaginous, while the medial half of it is a bit bony, and therefore the skin covering these two areas is a bit different. To the medial side is tightly firmly attached, while to the lateral side is a bit loosely attached. So these areas of the external acortic meatus covers with hairs and some glands called ceruminous glands. These glands actually they produce what we call cerumen. This cerumen is a modified sebum, commonly called as hair wax. The hair and then the cerumen have to prevent foreign objects from reaching the delicate tympanic membrane. The tympanic membrane needs to get protection, because if some dust or foreign substances manage to go and touch the tympanic membrane, it may cause problem. And therefore, the presence of the hair, and together with the secretions, the waxy secretions from the ceruminous glands, tend to protect the eardrums from all the foreign substances. In most cases, the entire aspect of the external cortex meatus is being lined by stratified squamous epithelium. Now, the tympanic membrane, which is a border between the external ear and then the internal, the middle ear, is a very thin membrane, and it consists of a very thin connective tissue, and therefore sound waves reaching the tympanic membrane make it or causes to vibrate, and these vibrations are picked and transmitted via the ossicles into the internal ear or inner ear. Now, looking at this diagram, we can picture that the inner ear, the outer ear, consists of the auricle, and the auricle have two major parts. We have the helix and we have the lobes. And we learned that the external ear, the auricle is mainly collecting sound waves and directing the sound waves to the external cortex meatus. We learned that in the external cortex meatus, these sound waves move off to the area of the tympanic membrane, and within the we have hairs, we have some waxy secretion from the cerebral glands that will now help in tapping or preventing some foreign substances or dust or whatsoever reaching the tympanic membrane. Okay, this diagram also indicates the different parts of the ear: the external, the middle, and then the inner. From what we have learned, we can see some traces of the elastic cartilages around the area of the external ear, especially toward the lateral half of the external cortex meatus, as earlier mentioned. And we have seen how these spurs reach off to the area of the middle ear, the tympanic membrane serving the border between the two. And also we have seen the lies or what covers the external cortex meatus. Now let's go to the inner middle ear. The middle ear, we have seen the two aspects of the outer ear, or the outer part of the ear. The middle ear, as earlier mentioned, is an air-filled cavity within the area of the temporal bone, and it is only involved in the sense of hearing. Now, the middle ear is connected to the inner ear via two openings. We have the two openings. We have the oval window and we have the round window. So what are the components of the middle ear? The middle ear consists of the border, which is the tympanic membrane, the tympanic cavity, the ossicles, and the Eustachian's tube. Now you begin to wonder, does the tympanic membrane belongs to the outer ear or to the middle ear? It belongs to neither of these two. It is served as the border between the outer ear and middle ear, but for the purpose of descriptions, we likely more related to the area, to the part of the middle ear. Now, the tympanic membrane is a kind of fibroelastic connective tissue which seems to be oval in shape and approximately about 0.1 millimeter thick, and composed of three major layers histologically. The outer layer is epidermis, the middle layer is fibrous tissue, and then the inner layer is made up of mucosa. So these are the three major layers that form the tympanic membrane. Don't forget, it's fibroelastic. It has the ability to extend. That is why it's quickly being influenced by the sound wave to vibrate. The tympanic cavity is a space between the tympanic membrane and then the inner ear, meaning that we know that the tympanic membrane is laterally and the inner ear is medially. So that's areas, that space where the air ossicles are located is what we refer to as the tympanic cavity. Now, this cavity communicates with the pharynx bear the extransverse tube, and it has some mastoid air cells. Therefore, these air cells enable air pressure to be equalized between the outside air and then the tympanic cavity, or the middle part of the air. Now, within the cavity, as I said earlier, we have the air ossicles. These air ossicles are 3 in numbers. We're going to see them: the incus, the malleus, and the stapes. And we also have a branch of a facial nerve called the chorda tympani. These nerves get branched at this area of the middle ear to supply one muscles in the middle ear, and also to have some special sensations in the area of the tongue. Now, the air ossicles, as Ella mentioned, there are 3 in numbers. There are bones, very small, tiny bones within the tympanic cavity. Functionally, they tend to transmit sound vibrations to the inner ear from the tympanic membrane to the oval window. Now, the 3 air ossicles from lateral to medial, we have the malleus, we have the incus, and we have the stapes. The malleus is firmly attached to the tympanic membrane. The stapes sit within the oval window of the cochlea, and in between the malleus and the stapes, the incus lies. Therefore, vibration from the tympanic membranes are carried by the malleus via the incus and transmitted to the stapes, and from stapes is now transmitted onto the oval window on the cochlea. Now, the vibration from the tympanic membrane, as I said, is transmitted to the malleus. Don't forget, these are also joints, these are also bones, and the connection between these bones joint exists. And the type of the joint usually present is a simple synovial joint. Now, within these areas, we have 2 muscles that control and regulate the movements of these bones. These muscles are called tensor tympani, which is attached to the malleus, and it is innervated by a branch of a trigeminal nerve, which is cranial nerve number 5. And we have the other muscles called the stapedius, which is attached to the stapes, and it is innervated by a facial nerve, which is a cranial nerve number 5. Now, I'm going to the inner ear. The inner ear consists of interconnecting fluid-filled tunnels and a chamber within the temporal bones. This part of the ear houses the sensory organs for hearing and balance, and it has 2 main components. We have the bony labyrinth and the membranous labyrinth. The bony labyrinth contains a fluid we call as perileaf, while the membranous labyrinth contains fluid which is called as endoleaf. Please remember or take note that the perileaf is very similar to cerebrospinal fluids, but endoleaf have a high concentration of potassium and a low concentration of a sodium, which is opposite from the perileaf.